There are several things that really annoy me. Just stupid, just writing mistakes. Personal favorites of mine include the word irregardless, always a classic. I've seemed to have quite a few people in my career who like to make mute points, not moot, mute. Just things like that where it's like, oh, come on. Silly comments like that very quickly cause you to form opinions of people, and you don't want someone to think that you don't know what you're doing just because you made a dumb mistake. And another source of general frustration is people who don't get to the point. If there's a simple way of saying something or asking something, that's how you should get things started. And if that doesn't get you the results you want, more often than not, you need to try a different approach, which often includes switching communication forms, which usually means going from an email to picking up the phone. And people increasingly do not understand the value of just picking up the phone and having a conversation, or even meeting in person in many cases. One thing I will never understand is some people who will spend half an hour composing an email in response to a bunch of questions somebody asked when they could have done it 5 minutes. They could have walked down the hall and said, hey, I got that email from you. So here's what happened. Here's the deal. Instead of a half hour's worth of writing, what is the point? And people just need to take a step back sometimes and think about that. Technology is very powerful and it can be tremendously helpful, but it is not always the answer. Sometimes there are easier ways.
Although it's not a pet peeve for me, a lot of people that I work with complain when people send messages all in caps. It sounds funny, but but they do. They'll send them all, especially the older guys in the business. And a lot of times people just get, they just go writing and just putting so much stuff in. And, you can do that, but, I'm like, if you're going to do that, just please make sure your executive summary, that first page, is only a page. Nobody's going to read all that stuff. All that other stuff that you're putting in there, that's just 99% of the people aren't going to read it. If somebody's interested, you're going to grab them on that executive summary, and then they're going to call you. What aggravates me is misspellings, because it's just like nowadays the computer, it'll do it for you. A lot of programs automatically spell check, and it's almost like you have to force the word to be wrong or something. When you're trying to read something fast, if you just mix up the A and the E or the this and the that, it makes you're like, what are they saying? Sometimes you don't know what the word is, and it takes you a minute, and then it's like a precious minute, right? I think that people judge you on it, In a sales-based business, I don't want to give people yet another reason to ignore my message.
So there's a few pet peeves that other people have, I think, that maybe don't irritate me as much, but I've heard are very irritating. But being very casual, or the text communication in your email, like LOL or things like that, people find pretty irritating. For me, two things really stick out. One is a really long, rambling, complicated paragraph or structure where I can't make sense of it, especially in email. If it's long and I have to scroll to read it, I'm going to have a real hard time and be irritated. So I like bullet points. I like bold. I like getting straight to the point. Even if you have additional context, say for further information, let's set up a meeting or follow this link or whatever that is. I think the other thing, and this, I don't know if it's a pet peeve as much as it's just some advice. I've had coworkers come in and not, I guess, have read the room appropriately, or maybe they're being too funny or too casual and the timing doesn't call for it, or not taking something as seriously as it should be taken, I think is another one. I remember this was years ago, but we had brought someone else into our client. So we were going to a client meeting. We were traveling there for this big presentation, and we had brought in a subject matter expert to give that presentation. And we had talked to them ahead of time, walked them through, hey, here's what the client, here's what their concerns are going to be. Here's what you need to make sure to address. We did all the right preparatory things. And the person didn't really take it as seriously as we did. For him, it was a small meeting, not a big deal. For us, this was a big client of ours, and we really cared about it. And he didn't listen to a lot of the prep things that we had asked him to pay attention to. So the client said, hey, Basically point blank, you don't know this about our business. We don't operate this way. And he was like, oh, I had no idea. And it was all things that we'd done previously and discussed previously. So that kind of thing will really irritate me. I guess the not taking things seriously enough, or as a whole, I think that's really a lack of respect for everyone's time, and in that as a whole is bothersome. Don't waste anyone's time.
In emails, my biggest pet peeve in writing is when somebody lays out a problem in an email and ends it with just thoughts. Thoughts. It's completely placing the responsibility for what's going on the person who's receiving the message. It's not providing any offer to help. It's not providing any additional information. It's sort of just like pushing it off your plate without any sort of expectation to collaborate on the problem. You just put thoughts at the end. It sort of doesn't say, what are you trying to figure out? Like, you've laid out this problem. What are you trying to learn from me? Why am I part of this communication? You don't get any of that from there. They clearly don't know what they want. So they are just blurting out what they know and putting the question thoughts at the end of it, I try to curb it, but my tolerance for grammar and spelling mistakes is pretty low. Though I try to curb it knowing that, like, depending on what the spelling mistake is, if we're talking about words that you don't use very often, I'm not going to judge too harsh. But if it doesn't look like they even took the time to proofread before they sent their email or sent that communication, it's hard to not be like, okay, like, you're not very professional. Like, it sort of gives the idea that they either didn't care enough to take the time to do it or they were too rushed, which both speak to them not being actually prepared to deliver that communication yet.
I'm kind of like a classically minded guy, and like, I like my written communication to be like structurally sound and again, clear and concise. And I don't need the letter U for the word you. Also, again, it's you're saying pet peeves. I'm not going to say these are capital crimes, basically, but like real clipped email responses that if I email something that it might be a little long-winded, but like it's I'm trying to kind of distill something that might be kind of complicated via email, and I just get like a K response. It's pretty condescending. I don't like that sort of thing. But again, it goes back to I can't take it personally. But yeah, it's a pet peeve, and I think it's the perfect typographic way of dismissing somebody. And especially if it's the response to a longer-winded, communication. Because, just that inverse is enough to cause whiplash.
But something that I find that I notice and that I find incredibly grating is when the dynamics of who looks at who when they talk. You're people in a room, people tend to look at the people with the most perceived power. So if I'm in a room and I notice that there are 2 junior people and 1 senior person, and people only talk to the senior person even though we're all having a group conversation, that irritates me. I can't help but notice it. You're there and maybe you're at the same level as that other person, but for some reason no one's talking to you. Actually, another pet peeve, I don't know if it's religious stuff that you're kind of looking into, but especially with PowerPoint and things like that, where like form ends up being a substitute for clarity, where it's like someone's like, oh, I need a slide to convey our roadmap. What would you like in the I don't know, like the thing, like put it to look like that, and really there's no slide that's going to please them, because they don't know what the plan is. We're missing a roadmap. Making a slide is not going to fix that, but the two things sometimes get conflated, and so that can be very annoying. Then other things that can be frustrating. The obvious emails fired off in anger, where it's like, or again the politics of CCing so and so, and oh, now you've included this person's manager. You're going to make it a thing now. It's got repercussions. I do believe in clarity in organizations, specificity, and just the thing I enjoy, like, bothers me sometimes when people don't write well. I'm sounding like such a great person right now.